Welcome to Community Read. So good to be here with you today. Today I'm so excited to have with us Cory Reese. Cory is an author of the books Nowhere Near First and Into the Furnace. Cory has a storied career running ultramarathons and is a columnist for the Ultra Running magazine. He uses running to help balance out a well-developed sweet tooth. When he's not running, Cory stays busy as a husband, father, and medical social worker. Please join me in welcoming Cory Reese. Cory, so happy that you could join us today.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear
Perfect.
me okay?
Yep, great.
Awesome. I've really been looking forward to this interview, and we're going to go by discussing Cory's book. I have it right here with me, Nowhere Near First. And I love this book, Cory. In Nowhere Near First, Southern Utah author Cory Reese shares his deeply personal story about experiencing his father's suicide at a young age and how this led to a career in endurance running and a desire to live life to the fullest. Nowhere Near First is a humorous, captivating, and uplifting account of Cory's memorable ultramarathon experiences. I'm so excited to get into this because you have had some crazy, fun, and wild experiences. And we only have, less than an hour. So we're gonna have to squeeze in as much as we can in our time.
Perfect.
But before we go into all of that, let's give us some of your background. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Salt Lake, and I've been in Southern Utah for maybe 20 years. I'm a social worker, runner.
So why did you decide to become a social worker? What prompted you to do that?
When I was going to college, I was working as just a residential staff member at a teen treatment facility, and really loved it. Loved working with the kids, and thought that working as a therapist would give me a way to get even closer and help on a little bit deeper level. And so that kind of prompted me going to school, and I actually went back later and worked as a therapist there.
Oh, wow. Okay, so how does that look during COVID-19, the social work? How does that work out during all this?
Good question. So now I work for the University of Utah dialysis program, so I'm doing medical social work stuff. So I'm still going into the dialysis centers. People on dialysis have to go in every other day and do dialysis. There's no way around it. It keeps them alive. So I still go into the dialysis centers and meet with the patients, and then some of my charting stuff I do from home. So kind of mixed right now.
Mm-hmm. How is it I don't know, I just feel like everyone's so scared, and there's been a lot of sadness, depression, uncertainty. Has that carried into your line of work?
Yeah, definitely.
With patients,
Yeah, the unknown is so hard. I mean, we don't know when this is going to end. We don't know what our new normal is going to look like. And yeah, it's definitely had a big impact. The social isolation has been hard for myself, and I think everyone. So it's been tough.
Yeah, I think social isolation is a really hard thing for people, especially people recovering from surgery and different illnesses. I think having that family support is really important. And so I think that's really hard during this time of isolation.
Yeah,
I've heard
for sure.
that from people. Yeah,
Yep.
that would be hard. Shoot.
Yep.
So tell me about meeting your wife, Mel. So how did you meet Mel? I love Mel. She's one of the sweetest people I know.
She's pretty awesome. So I was a sophomore in high school, and this new girl moves in and starts going to school toward the end of my 10th grade year. And so I sat next to her in history class and thought, she's cute. I like her. And ended up asking her to go to a dance with me. And we went on a date and basically just started dating back then. And she's the only person I've ever dated. We got married, and
that's perfect. I love your book because you have pictures in it, and there you are taking her to the dance. I love that picture.
Yeah, back in my younger years, a few less gray hairs back then.
We look like such babies in those school pictures. I love looking back at them though. I have to tell you, one of my favorite stories about Mel. So we kind of, Jen, I used to live by you guys back in the day. I mean, not right by you, but kind of over by you. And anyway, Mel had just had a baby. I know it's not Jackson, it's your middle. I can't remember if it's Kylie
Danica.
or Danica. Okay, so she had Danica. And I was pregnant with my oldest, and she was so sweet. And she's like, "Here, have some of my maternity clothes." And she brought out this big tote of maternity clothes, and it was so sweet because I was so poor and I couldn't afford maternity clothes. And then I was in my prenatal appointment, sitting in the waiting room, and Mel was sitting across from me, and I'm like, "Mel, what are you doing here?" She's like, "I'm pregnant again."
Yep. They're all pretty close together.
I will bring you back your maternity clothes. So I brought them back for the next day.
That's
so
funny.
That was fun. And so they are, what do you call that when you're born within a year? Isn't there a term for that?
Yeah. Is it
something twins?
Irish twins?
Irish
something
twins
like
or
that.
Something like that? Yeah, it's even a pair of Irish twins.
Yep.
Yes, and they're all July babies, if I remember that right.
Got a good memory. That's right.
Yeah, I don't know. Some kind of issue with my brain. I do remember the most random things, but I do remember that. Birthdays are something I really remember. I don't know why. So I wanted to tell you, I'm very impressed with you, Cory. You are a man of many, many talents. I even have here, I have to share. I know you play the piano, and I have a couple of your CDs. I still listen to these all the time.
That's
I love
funny.
your Christmas music. I love.
Thank you.
You have some spiritual music. I love listening to on Sundays. So
Thank
awesome.
Thank you.
So a man of many talents. So I want to know, and seriously, and everything you do it on a really big scale and just amazing. So tell me, why running? What made you get into running?
Well, I saw articles in the Spectrum newspaper right after the St. George Marathon, and the pictures just looked so cool, and I was so inspired that people could train and work so hard to run 26 miles. And it took a few years of that desire before I finally was able to train and run one myself. So that's really where it started, was just wanting to participate in the St. George Marathon. And so I ran one and loved and hated it, and ran another one and loved and hated it. You know how that goes. So
love hate, definitely.
Yeah, it's a love-hate relationship.
Yes. So what year was that? What year did you start really getting into marathons? Do you remember that?
I think my first St. George Marathon was 2009.
Okay.
So it's been a while.
And how many St. George Marathons have you run? Do you know?
I don't know. Maybe 4 or 5, maybe.
Yeah. Well, if you count some of those extra ones you've done at the St. George Marathon, there's a lot more than that.
Maybe a few more, yeah.
A few more of that. Yes. So St. George, was that your very first marathon then in 2009?
Yep.
Very first one. Okay.
Yeah.
So where did you go from running a marathon, which is grueling, love, hate in itself, to thinking, what sounds even better than that is 50 or maybe even 100? So where did that come from? Where did you get that motivation for that?
Well, after the marathon, I was running with my friend Tom Danzy. You know the Danzys.
Oh, yeah, Tom.
So Tom invited me on my first trail run, and I was so scared. I was so intimidated because the trails are so different than running on the road. So I went with him and just really fell in love with running on trails. And so pretty much from there on, I did most of my running on trails. And back at that time, I usually had one day off during the week from work, and my kids were at school. And so I would just go out on the trails all day, and I just loved being out there. And I thought, well, that's what an ultramarathon is basically just all day on the trails. And that sounds fun. So I guess I'll give it a try. And I realized it's not necessarily that easy, like just going and having a fun day on the trails. So I think my first 100-miler was a couple years later. I think it was 2011 that I ran my first 100-miler. And if the relationship with marathons was love-hate, that was just exemplified with the 100 milers. Like I
100
loved them so
times.
much more and I hated them so much more. And yeah, it just was such an amazing experience, and so difficult. And so that sense of satisfaction once I got to the finish line, I guess it just got into my blood, and I it's been in my blood ever since.
Yeah, and still is. So one of the things we're going to be doing today, going through your book, is we're going to be reliving some of these experiences, these things that have gotten into your blood.
Okay.
You do things on such a fun level. I have to share. I don't know if you remember this. This was back in, and you know, the running community is a wonderful community. There are so many
Yes.
fun. I mean, we are all struggling together. You know, before COVID, where we're in this together, that was the running community. Like, we're in this together. And it
Totally.
doesn't matter if you're the front of the pack or the back of the pack. And that's why I love Nowhere Near First, because some of the funnest people are in the back.
Yeah.
Like, they knew how to party and have fun and get
Totally.
into it laughing.
Uh-huh.
Yes. So I was going back. This is in. So I make these little scrapbooks to
Oh
remind me
yeah,
of
yeah.
all the crazy times when I'm like, oh yeah, I did that. I remember. But I
Nice.
have one in here when you had your birthday party.
Oh,
Do you
that's
remember
right.
that?
Yes, I do. Yep.
For your 40th, your birthday's in
Yeah.
December. See, I
Yep.
remember birthday things. And we went up on cowbell with
Uh-huh.
your birthday cake, and we ran on more cowbell. I can't remember how long that is. And we each took a turn
Uh-huh.
carrying this huge birthday cake, running along the trails. And then at the very end, we all like ate it with our hands.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was so much fun. And that's what this book is all full of. It's just fun, entertaining, crazy stories of what this is like to run with Cory
Uh-huh.
Reese. And I just loved it, loved it. So
Thank
let's go
you.
through. I've written through a couple. Oh man, because there's so many fun stories. But let's talk about your 205 miler on a 1 mile loop course.
Okay.
Tell us about that story.
There's a crazy race in Arizona called Across the Years, and it's called that because it usually starts a couple days before the new year and runs into the new year. So there's different divisions, but basically it's a timed race. So you can sign up to run 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours. And it's a 1 mile loop, and you basically just do as many miles as you can in that time. So you can stop and rest whenever you want. You can sleep whenever you want. You can eat whenever you, and you just try and get as many miles as you can. And so um, my goal was to try and get over 200 in those 3 days, and
3 days.
3 days. So
When do you sleep?
it was I I caught some sleep every once in a while. It's so funny. Like I would be so tired just sleepwalking. I could not stay awake. And then I would go in my tent, and I had a hard time sleeping because my legs and my feet hurt so
Everything
bad.
hurts.
So yeah,
You're just
it,
laying there.
it's frustrating to be so tired and not be able to sleep. I remember um, my son was there too, and so I said, "Okay, Jackson, I'm gonna lay down and go to sleep." And so after a couple minutes with my eyes closed, I could eyes and said, "Jackson, stop squeezing my feet." And then I realized that he wasn't in the tent. I was feeling my heartbeat in my
Oh,
toes. So
that sounds awful.
so it was a challenging experience, but it's kind of fun that it was just one aid station, and the food was just like a Costco buffet, all kinds of candy and chips and soda.
How do you eat when you run? I know you love to like have your sweets. I run a marathon. I can't eat for a day. I just
Yeah.
get so sick to my stomach. How do you do that? You have like an iron stomach, I think.
Did we lose his connection?
Yeah, I think we lost it. Are you there, Cory?
Let's see if he snaps back.
Let's see. Is he there?
The wonders of technology, huh?
Oh, I know. Isn't that the truth? Wait, maybe there he
Oh,
is.
there we
you are,
go.
Cory.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. So all I did, I said iron stomach, and then I didn't hear what happened
Oh,
after that.
I
Sorry,
try
we
to.
went forever.
No worries. In my training, I try to practice forcing myself to eat so that during races I'm kind of used to it. So that
Because
helps.
you need to fuel, or else
Yep.
you get so sick.
Yep. Exactly. Yep.
So, what are some of the things that you use to fuel yourself on these runs?
Well, I used to try to do like the sports nutrition stuff and gels and energy drinks and stuff like that, like electrolyte drinks, and those are okay. But I kind of have got to a point where I just like regular food. So fruit is good. I have a really strong sweet tooth, so candy is good. It's easy calories and
Easy, fast calories. Nothing that
yep,
hangs on too long.
yep.
If you're running.
Yeah.
Okay, and tell me, when do you find time to train? Like, you're a husband, you have work, you have your kids. I mean, you have so much you're doing anyway. When do you find time to train? Because you have to train for these long races. It's not a matter of going out for a couple of miles in the morning. Like, when do you train for these big things, and how?
My family is really important, so I try to not have running impact that a ton. So I'll go late at night or early in the morning while they're asleep. Before all the COVID stuff, I would go, if I had a day off during the week, I would just go run while they were in school. Sometimes I'll do like all night runs just to get lots of miles.
Uh-oh.
Oh my goodness, lost it again. Cory, are you there? I don't know what it, wait. Is it coming back? So let's see, late night running, which is nice around in Washington County because it gets just so hot.
Well, what about you, Nicole? Have you ever run the St. George Marathon? You're down there.
I have run the St. George Marathon. I've actually run it 10 times.
No kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in the 10-year club, baby.
Right on.
Yeah.
It's like maybe he had to.
Maybe he has to get off and get back on again. That's fine. He'll find it again. There he is. There he comes.
Welcome back.
There we go. Cory, hey.
Why I keep losing you?
No, I know. I don't know. Some days are like that. No, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay,
so,
sorry about that.
You were saying, no, you're good. So you run through the night. I bet that's nice, though, because it gets so hot around here.
Yes, yes.
In Washington County. Oh.
Yeah,
you
nights
run in
are good.
the summer? Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of dread the summer because it's so hot.
Right. Just so hot. So do you, when you are running around town getting ready for these races, do you have specific routes you go to try and like stay away from traffic? Do you do a lot of trail runs? Do you run to St. George? Like, where are your running routes?
I kind of mix it up. I do a lot of stuff on trails, and then sometimes I'll run to St. George and back, and then I'll just use gas stations for my aid stations.
Stuff?
Yep.
Didn't I say bathrooms? It really works.
Bathrooms and Dr. Pepper and
Dr. Pepper. You know, before I started running, I used to think outhouses, the little like porta potties were just horrible. Never. And they became my best friends later.
Yep.
Where it's kind of like, oh, there's like a place for me to sit.
Yep.
As horrible as that sounds, but it is. Running,
it's true. It's true.
Yes. Okay, so I want to hear about your 100-miler that you did on a cruise ship. Tell me about this. Where did you get the idea for this? How did you talk Mel into this? Like, what? Tell me about this. And where were you on this cruise?
Okay, so this was a year or two ago. It was a California coast cruise, and we went with my wife's friend and her whole family, and so there was a day at sea, and so the kids had lots of other kids to play with. My wife had her friend to hang out with. And so I hadn't heard of anyone doing 100-miler on a cruise ship before. So I thought, well, maybe for that day at sea when everyone's just going to be hanging out at the pool, maybe I'll just go onto the running track and just run while everyone's out swimming. So I mentioned it to Mel, like, what do you think? And she said, yeah, totally, do it. So when I got her thumbs up, I decided I'd give it a try. I didn't really know what to expect on the boat. I didn't know how big the track would be. So once we got there, we saw that it took 16 loops to make a mile.
Oh,
so
16 loops.
Yeah, so 1,600 loops to do 100 miles. So it was.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot.
It was a lot. Yeah.
Did you attract attention? I mean, did you get like a crowd cheering you on, or did people not notice you running constantly?
I didn't want to. I tried to kind of not make a big deal about it because I knew people would be like, "You are insane. You are a lunatic." So
social media, people are filming you.
I did have every once in a while, like someone would come up and be like, "Weren't you running up here 2 hours ago?" And I'd just say, yeah. And I wouldn't tell them, actually, I've been running up here for 18 hours. So,
How long did it take you?
I think it took 27 hours or something like that. 26
Did you take
hours.
a break and sleep at all during that, or
No.
you just nonstop?
Yeah.
And what did you use for fuel? I mean, I guess there's a lot of food on a cruise ship.
Yeah, it was nice. My kids, every once in a while, they would go to one of the little snack places and get some pizza for me or some muffins or something. So
what about the ice cream? That's my favorite on a cruise ship.
Yes,
the ice cream comes,
lots of ice cream. Yep.
So with that, I mean, I've done a cruise before, and they always say, what, you come home 10 pounds heavier on a cruise ship. Did you come home quite a bit lighter after that?
I didn't gain weight on the cruise, which is
huge.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yep. That's awesome. So Cory, I am curious, before we go on to any of these other experiences I have written down, tell me what motivated you to want to write about these experiences, because you've written Nowhere Near First, and then you wrote Into the Furnace. Do you have any of the books that you were in the process of writing, or what's motivated you to write them down? Just like a journal so that you could be like, I can't believe this ever happened? Like,
yeah, part of it is, well, I had been writing a blog for quite a few years, and Steve Hooper, who runs the St. George Running Center, had been pestering me for a few years, like, you should write a book, and I just kept saying, I don't know, I don't know how to do that. I wouldn't know where to start. And he said, well, just take some of the experiences that you've written about on the blog and just use that as kind of a framework and build on that. And I hadn't thought of that before, but it made sense. And so I took some of the stories from the blog and on my blog, I really love photography and using pictures to help tell the stories from runs.
Oh, yeah.
And so in a book, you don't have pictures like that. And so it forced me to kind of build the story without using pictures. And so it was really fun to just kind of like bring people into the world of ultra running. And the second book is more focused on Badwater, which is a 135-mile run across Death Valley in July. So I did that a couple of years ago, and it was just such a profound experience. And there's such
tell us about that. Tell us about Badwater. I mean, Death Valley and running 135 miles, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so how, when, why, where? Tell me about that experience.
Well, I had run a bunch of 100-milers, and I wouldn't say that 100-milers were easy, but I kind of knew what to expect. I knew how to pace myself. I knew where it would hurt. I knew how to push through. But this one in Death Valley, I just had no idea what to expect. And National Geographic said it was the toughest foot race in the world, and I thought, okay, well,
Oh. You're like,
I'll
let's
give
do
that a
one.
try. Yeah, I'll see how it goes. So it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But since that time, I had a lot of really cool experiences. I got to meet the guy who did that run for the first time 40 years ago. It took him a bunch of years. He did it by himself, and it was just he was kind of like a pioneer in ultra running to be able to do that. And I was able to meet with him just a couple months before he died, and hear about his experience and some of the stuff that I had never heard before. So that went into the book too. And yeah, I think Death Valley is a really, I just feel really connected to that place.
Oh, how cool. So this Badwater, when is it during the year?
It's in July.
In July. Of course, it's going to be in July.
Yes, of course.
The hottest month of the year. Is
Yes.
it supported? Do you have to provide your own support? How does it work?
Yeah, there's no aid stations. You have to have a crew with you. So you have to have a band that stays with you. And so I had my wife and a couple friends who were there, and so they would kind of take turns. One would come out running with me for a couple miles, one would drive the van, a couple would get food. And so it was just like a well-oiled machine. They were so awesome. And I just was so grateful for their help. I couldn't have done it without them. And then in the couple years after I ran it, I was able to go back and serve as a crew for a couple different people and get that perspective too, to see what it's like from that end. So I mean, running it is of course really hard, but acting as a crew person is also very, very difficult because people are relying on you. So it's fun.
Right. Don't want that air conditioning to be going out in your van.
That's right.
So I'm curious, as you're running, your feet have got to be getting so hot. Do you change out shoes a lot as you run, or how many miles do you get in, and how much time do you have to finish this race?
You have 48 hours. And I was pretty close. There was a cutoff, I think around mile 52, that you had to be at that point by a certain time or else you would get pulled from the race. And I was just barely there in time. So I was pretty nervous. I was pretty close to the cutoff. And after that, I got a little farther away from the cutoffs, but I still took, I think, 45 hours to finish the race. And I did go through a couple pairs of shoes. I had heard that people's shoes melt during that race.
Oh
and
my gosh.
I didn't really have that experience until the very end. They were resurfacing the road, and the asphalt was just so hot that's when I could feel like my shoes were starting to disintegrate then.
Melting. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So how many people come out to do these races? Do they have a cutoff, a limit?
Yeah.
Or is it just the more the merrier? Or do you have to, I don't know, qualify to go in and ask to do it? How does that work?
It sounds crazy, but it's actually a really hard race to get into. So you have to qualify for it. You have to have run a certain number of 100-milers. And then you basically...
Just to make sure that you can do it probably, right?
Yep, exactly. And then you pretty much submit, like, it's kind of like a job resume, like an application where there were lots of questions and why I wanted to do it, my experience in running, just lots and lots of questions. And then the race director and a team of people go through each application, and then they choose 100 people to do it. So, I mean, it sounds crazy that there's anyone who would want to do it, but it's actually pretty hard to get into. So I felt fortunate to be able to go run it.
So when you ran it, how many people were doing it the year you did it?
I think the finish rate was really high. I think, this is just a rough guess, but I think like 85 out of the 100 people finished. he wants people to finish, so he's pretty selective about choosing people that have a lot of experience that he thinks will finish. So yeah.
Cory, that's a really, really long time to run, a lot of time to yourself. What do you do to entertain yourself as you run?
I like to listen to audiobooks and podcasts, and then when I get tired, then I'll turn on the music, and that usually helps wake me up a little bit.
Maybe get your stride going a little bit further.
Yeah.
A little longer.
Yep.
Stride.
Yep.
That's awesome. Do you have any good books that you'd recommend that you've been listening to? I follow you on Goodreads, so I see some of the stuff you read. You read some great stuff. But do you have anything that's like your favorite? Oh, thanks.
Let's see. One of the ones that I finished recently that I really loved was Just Mercy. Have you read that one?
I just read that. Yes,
so
this
good.
last week. I loved it.
Yeah, good. It's amazing. Yeah, that was a good one.
That was good. Have you seen the movie?
Yes, I loved that too.
Yeah, I liked the movie, but I liked the book more because the movie was just a portion of the book. The book encompasses so much.
Yes.
And it was a real call to arms to me.
I agree.
Like, oh!
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it was good. That would be a good one to listen to. So what other ones have you listened to?
I think the one that I'm listening to right now, I think I saw on your list, you've read Why We Sleep.
Oh, that would be good for you, Cory, about when you need to be getting some sleep.
Yep.
Don't stress about it, but maybe it's good for your body to sleep sometimes.
Yes, could be.
Yeah, no, they've looked into this, I guess, and found all these health benefits and health detriments when you don't get enough sleep. It's a thing.
It's a thing.
Super important, especially when you're recovering from long distance running.
Definitely.
Yep. So have you had any injuries or anything that slowed you down from your running?
Every once in a while, I'll start having problems with my knees. Like they'll just get kind of tight and sore. When I first started running, I was really dumb. Like I was following a training plan, and it would say, okay, today you're supposed to run 8 miles. So I would go run 8 miles, even though my knees were saying, no, just skip today. So I was stubborn and thought that I was doing the right thing to run through it because that's what my training plan said to do. And it finally, after a year or two, I just realized, okay, a training plan is not the way to go for me. Like I just need to do my own thing, and I need to listen to my body. If my body is saying to rest, then I'll rest. If I'm starting to get sore, then I'll take it easy. So I've had far fewer injuries since I really learned to listen to my body and take care of myself.
Yeah, super important.
Yep.
So Cory, going back into your book, one of the things I want to talk to you about is your quadruple St. George Marathon. And I have to say my favorite page of your book is on page 201. Where it says, while I was standing on the sidewalk in the distance, eating the sandwich. This is when you were finishing up your second marathon. A car pulled up. Our friends Amber Farmer, Nicole Stout, and Amanda Jocelyn stopped out and gave me Twinkies.
I remember that.
Shout out. I loved it. I was so excited. I was like, new name of the book now. And I'm like, oh, that's me.
Yep, I remember that. I still remember.
Give me the idea. I remember getting ready to go up to do the St. George Marathon, and we were like, where is Cory? Where would Cory be at? We got to go find him. And then we texted Mel, and she's like, oh, he just finished up his second marathon. So we had to go find you. So where did you get this idea for not just like a back there and back, but like a quadruple St. George Marathon? Where did this idea come from?
I think I had done a double St. George Marathon where I started at the finish line and ran up to the start and then back. I think I did that once or maybe twice. And then I had gotten more experience with 100 milers and had run some of my own just solo 100 milers and just got the idea, well, maybe I'll try and do that for the St. George Marathon. So the tricky part, there were a few tricky parts with that. I started the day before, and so I ran from the finish line up to the start line and then back to the finish and then up to the start. And so the first tricky part was making sure that I got back up to the start line in time to start with the rest of the marathon.
Right.
Because I
Because that
didn't.
would be a thing.
That would be bad if I didn't get there in time.
Right, because they have
So,
a cutoff.
yep, they do. Yeah. So that was the next tricky part was, okay, if I do make it up there in time to start with everyone, there's cutoffs. Like I have to run fast enough to meet the cutoffs. So normally, like the last 25 miles of a 100-miler, they're much slower. But with this, I had to make sure I was staying up with my pace to make sure that I finished in time. So it was not a fast marathon, but I finished it, and actually finished the last marathon with a couple friends of mine who were doing a double St. George marathon. So we were all in the pain
All
cave.
in on it together.
Yep.
Together. In on it together.
Yeah.
Well, how was it? I think you should have gotten more than just one medal at the end. You should have gotten four, or like a really big one.
They just got one, but I have a collection of belt buckles that I've gotten from 100-milers, and
That's what they do for 100-milers, or belt buckles?
Yeah, that's the award for 100-milers. So I have my St. George Marathon medal with my buckles from the time that I ran 100 miles there.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you ever wear the buckles? Like, are they made so you can wear them?
They are, but I feel kind of, I don't know. I feel kind of silly wearing them. I don't want to like draw attention to myself. So I'll usually
like
wear
when you
them.
wear those running medals too. Same thing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Find a place to put it.
Yeah. I try to, I usually force myself to wear it for one day, and then I don't wear it anymore.
Cory, we have a couple of questions I'm going to ask that have come in, and some of them are great. And I was wondering some of these same things. Do you get bored when you run for so long, and especially on a track? Because I know you did 100 miles on a track. I remember when you did that. How do you keep your focus?
I don't, I guess
do you use any running apps? That's another question.
No, I don't use any running apps. I do somehow, I've realized my Garmin watch is connected to Strava, so I think it uploads stuff. I never get on to Strava. I don't track my miles. Staying focused and not getting busy, I guess I just something in my brain, I just don't get bored when I'm out running. There's just so much I feel like there's always so much to think about. But really, most of the time I'm listening to a book or podcast. I know some people are anti, like they feel like running should just be out hearing what's going on. I'm okay with that. Like I can do that, but I prefer to listen to something. So as long as I've got something to listen to, I never feel bored, even when I'm doing the same thing over and over, even if it's like a loop course. So yeah, I don't mind that.
Well, Susie is asking, what are your favorite running shoes and your must-have equipment for these long distance runs?
I've tried a few different brands of shoes. Right now, my favorite is the I like the Lone Peak for trail shoes. They just have good grip, and they're comfortable for me. Other essential gear, let's see. A good headlamp. I have a black diamond headlamp
that's essential.
That's essential.
That's happened to me before.
Yep.
Yep. Someone to help me.
Yep. Yeah, the other essential with
batteries.
That's it. That's the other essential, a couple backup batteries. Gosh, the other essential stuff, I mean, I've got like a hydration pack, and usually my essential stuff is like a couple candy bars in my pack.
Oh, yes. Yes, and Hostess.
So, yep.
Haven is wondering, for someone just starting to run, what is good advice for keeping a routine and pacing?
That's a really good question. I think the key when you're getting into running is to start super slow. Give your body lots and lots of time to acclimate to the demands of running, because it's hard on your body, and your muscles and bones and joints will adapt, but you just have to give them time. With pacing, I have learned this lesson the hard way, that it's so important to just start so slow. Um, during my first 100-miler, I can't remember. I mentioned the mileage in the book. I can't remember off the top of my head, but somewhere around like mile 45 or something. I was running pretty fast. I was feeling good, and I passed two people, and the guy said, "Don't worry, the race doesn't start until mile 70 or 75." And I thought, what are you talking about? Like, that's, and I just kept running on by. Well, then I realized, oh, he's right. When I was ready to die at mile 75, like, you really do have to just go so uncomfortably slow at the start so that you have the energy to finish. One analogy that I really like, I heard someone named Bryce Thatcher say that it's kind of like spreading peanut butter across a piece of bread. Like, you don't want to spread all the peanut butter at first and then run out at the end. You don't want to start thin and then have all the peanut butter left at the end. Like, you want to try and spread it smoothly across the whole thing. So I think that's what I shoot for when I'm thinking about expending energy during a run.
Stephen wants to know, and this kind of was going with what you were just saying, have there been studies on long-term health benefits or detriments of ultra long distance running? Do you know anything about that? Have you looked into that?
I have not looked a ton into that. If I had to guess, I would say there's probably some benefits with things like heart and I think my joints, it sounds weird, but I think my joints are actually stronger now than when I started. They feel, I think the muscles have kind of strengthened around my knees. But if I had to guess, I would say these 100-milers probably aren't the greatest thing for your health. So I can see myself starting to taper down. They're hard on you. Yeah. So
how many have you done?
I think I've done maybe 3,500 milers.
35.
Somewhere around there, maybe 40. I don't know.
Whoa. Good job. That's amazing. That is so cool. Thank you. That is awesome. Well, I have to tell you, some of the funnest things I've done with races are concerned is your baker's dozen. I have my little baker's dozen mug. But I love this because it's like the perfect size for cereal. And I have a water right now for it.
Yep.
But just wrapping up real quick, you came up with that race kind of a while, like, when was that? 2011 was when you did it. So what motivated you to come up with that race?
Well,
and it's still, I know you're not in charge of it anymore. You don't direct it. You sold it to the running center, but I'm just curious but it's so fun.
Well, I hadn't heard of a race like that back then. I wasn't aware of any races like this one. You do like a 3 or 3.5 mile loop, and you come back to the same place every time. So
the sugar
shack, and you have to eat a treat before you go on. So
yes,
part of it was
Cory Reese
just celebrating sugar and friends, and we don't time it. It's just super casual, and I think my motivation was like, races are fun to challenge yourself and push yourself, but races don't always have to be challenging and pushing yourself. Like, they should be fun. I think not just for this race, but for any race. Like, go run a half marathon or a marathon or 100-miler, and don't take your watch. Just go do it for fun, and don't put the pressure on yourself of having to meet a certain time and feeling disappointed if you don't meet a certain goal. Like, just go enjoy it. Just have fun. So that's kind of where the idea came from.
Yeah, that's great advice. So during COVID, have you been running?
I have. I I haven't been doing any races, and so I was kind of itching to just go do a really long run, but I didn't want to. Ideally, I would have liked to have done 100 miler, like maybe go to St. George and Santa Clara and Ivans and just kind of like just do a road 100 miler just using gas stations.
It'd be
But
COVID 119.
I thought about that, but then I thought, well, they don't really want us going to places unnecessarily. So I decided that I would just run 100 miler around the block. So we have a
Ooh.
0.9 mile loop block. And so I think this was a couple weeks ago. I just started running, and 100 miles later finished the run.
That's awesome. Did you go out and celebrate?
No, I pretty much crashed on the couch.
Oh, I love that. I love that. The COVID 100 miler around the block race. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Cory, we're like running out of time, but I have had so much fun talking to you. This has been so fun. Glad to hear that you're still out there running, and let us know if you come out with any more books of any of your crazy adventures. But where can we find this book? Nowhere Near First. Where do you find that?
You can find it on Amazon, Kindle, Audible, pretty much wherever you normally get
all
books.
The places. Okay, awesome. Yes. And if you want to get motivated to run, this is a fantastic interview, Cory. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
And from all of us here at Community Education, we hope you enjoyed learning something new. You can watch all of these recordings at suu.edu/keeplearning or follow our YouTube channel named Be Wise Keep Learning. Nicole and Cory, thank you for joining us. Anything you need to add, Nicole?
Just tune in next week. We're going to have Shannon Delaney. She's going to be coming she is the Iron County Superintendent, and she will be coming on talking about the novel Educated. That will be a really interesting one. I really like that a lot. So until then, treat yourself to a book. Be wise. Keep learning.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Cory.